He laughed when I fell. He thought I'd drown. He thought wrong. The water hit me like concrete, cold and merciless, pulling me under. My chest burned as I fought my way to the surface, sputtering, gasping, clawing at the lake like a man dragging himself out of a grave. When I finally broke through, I heard at his laughter. Jason, my son-in-law, standing on the wooden dock with that smug, stupid grin plastered across his face, his hand still outstretched from the shove. "You'll thank me for the swim, old man," he shouted like this was some kind of joke. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. But I wasn't laughing. The lake behind our cabin in Clearwater, Minnesota, had always been my sanctuary. A place where my wife and I used to sit at sunset, holding coffee cups and planning out the years we thought we had ahead. She'd been gone 2 years now. The cabin was all I had left of her. And today, my daughter, Rachel, had brought Jason up here, insisting it would be good family time. Family. Right. I pulled myself to the dock ladder, my hands numb from the cold. Jason didn't move to help. He just stood there, smirking, sipping his beer like he was king of my damn world. "Careful, Tom," he said, looking down at me. "Don't slip again." I didn't slip. We both knew that. By the time I hauled myself out, my shirt clung to my chest, water dripping into my boots. Jason chuckled and turned away, calling over his shoulder, "Dry off before dinner, huh? Rachel doesn't like when you drip all over the floor." He walked inside my cabin like he owned the place. I stood there, water pooling at my feet, the sun dipping low behind the pines, painting the lake in fire and blood. My heart pounded, not just from the shock of the water, but from the rage twisting in my gut. Inside, Rachel's voice floated through the screen door. "Dad? Everything okay out there?" Jason answered before I could. "He's fine, just clumsy." I stayed on the porch until my clothes stopped dripping, staring at the reflection of the fading sky on the water. My wife's face flashed in my mind, her soft smile, her quiet strength. She'd warned me about Jason the first time she met him. "He hides cruelty behind charm," she'd whispered that night in bed. I'd brushed it off back then, told her Rachel knew what she was doing. But now she was gone, and all I had left was Rachel and a son-in-law who just tried to kill me with a smile on his face. At dinner, Jason played the part. He poured Rachel wine, kissed her cheek, told stories about his business deals in Chicago. She laughed at his jokes, too nervous to notice how hollow they were. Every time she glanced at me, I forced a smile, pushing down the fury boiling inside. "So, Tom," Jason said suddenly, spearing a steak with his fork, "you ever think about selling this place? Rachel and I could put the money to good use. Big plans. Investments." Rachel's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Jason dash, "What?" "I'm just saying. This cabin's wasted on one old man." "We could dash, not happening." I cut in. My voice was sharp, steady. "This place stays with me." Jason's eyes narrowed for just a second before he plastered on that fake grin again. Of course. Just an idea, but I saw it. That flash of calculation. The same look I used to see in loan applicants back when I worked at the bank, the ones who thought they could charm me into overlooking their lies. After dinner, Rachel excused herself to take a call. Jason leaned back in his chair, swirling the last of his whiskey. "You know, Tom," he said casually, "accidents happen out here. Remote places. People slip. Boats tip. You never know." The way he said it like a warning wrapped in small talk made my jaw tighten. "I slipped once today," I said. My eyes locked on his. "It won't happen again." For the first time, his grin faltered. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, the walls creaking softly as the wind moved through the pines. I could hear Jason's muffled voice through the thin walls, charming Rachel, spinning his web tighter around her. I stared at the ceiling, my fists clenched on top of the blanket. Jason thought I was weak, old, disposable. But I wasn't done yet. The lake outside shimmered under the moonlight, calm and silent, like it was waiting for me to decide what kind of man I was going to be. The man who let himself be pushed around, or the man who finally pushed back. I closed my eyes and made a promise to myself and to the woman whose picture sat framed on my nightstand. Jason was going to regret the day he put his hands on me, and I already knew exactly how to start. Morning came heavy, with the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I stood by the window, coffee steaming in my hand, watching the lake. The same water Jason had shoved me into less than 12 hours ago. It looked calm, innocent. But I knew better. Lakes remember. They keep secrets until someone's ready to drag them back to the surface. Rachel was still asleep upstairs. Jason, of course, had already taken my truck into town without asking. He left his empty whiskey glass on the counter, smudged with fingerprints like a dog marking territory. I set the mug down carefully, pulled a notebook from the drawer, and began writing. Not emotions, not feelings, facts, dates, actions, words. Every detail of last night's shove, his comments at dinner, the threat dressed up as small talk. I wrote it all down like a banker compiling a fraud report. That's what Jason was, a fraud wrapped in expensive cologne and fake smiles. By the time Rachel wandered downstairs in her robe, I was already dressed, my old leather jacket zipped, boots laced tight. "Morning, Dad," she mumbled, pouring coffee. "Morning," she eyed the notebook on the table. "What's that?" "Old habit," I said. "I like to keep records." She shrugged and went back to scrolling on her phone. She didn't see what I saw, Jason hollowing her out, piece by piece, until she couldn't tell which thoughts were hers and which were his. When Jason rolled back up in my truck an hour later, sunglasses on, grinning like the devil, I already had my plan forming. "Gas tank was low," he said, tossing me the keys. "Don't worry, I filled it. You can thank me later." I didn't thank him. Instead, I spent the afternoon in the town library. People forget libraries are more than dusty shelves, they're treasure vaults. Property records, business licenses, archived newspapers. I knew where to look, and I had patience. That's something Jason would never understand. By sundown, I had a neat little folder of printouts. Jason's business ventures in Chicago, mostly dissolved LLCs, all shut down within 3 years. Debt collectors had filed claims, but the trail went cold. A man who learned to cover his tracks just enough to stay one step ahead. But the real gem came from an old Tribune article buried in the archives. Jason's name in black and white, mentioned in connection with a construction firm under federal investigation for embezzlement. He hadn't been charged, but his partners had. Jason had walked away, clean on paper. Clean on paper didn't mean clean in life. Back at the cabin, Jason was on the deck, beer in hand, talking loudly on his phone about closing deals and big investors. Rachel sat nearby, nodding along like a proud wife, as if her husband's words weren't empty air. I leaned against the doorway, listening, memorizing every lie he told. After he hung up, I walked past him without a word, down to the dock. The boards creaked under my boots. The spot where he'd shoved me still glistened faintly, water dripping between the slats. I knelt and touched the wood. Cold. Smooth. A reminder. "Thinking about taking another swim, Tom?" Jason called out behind me, mocking. I stood slowly, turned to face him. "No, I was thinking about how deep this lake runs." He smirked, not understanding. But he would. That night, when the house was quiet, I pulled out my wife's old camera. A solid Nikon, still sharp as the day she bought it. I went through Jason's truck, snapping photos. Empty beer cans shoved under the seat. Receipts from bars and gentlemen's clubs, a crumpled invoice from a mechanic showing overdue payments. Evidence. The next morning, while Jason snored in the guest room and Rachel cooked breakfast, I drove to Sheriff Daniel's office in town. Old friend of mine. We'd hunted deer together 20 years back. He looked older now, heavier, but his handshake was firm. "What brings you in, Tom?" "Haven't seen you in a while." I set the folder of printouts on his desk. "Just wanted to ask about a man named Jason Whitmore. My son-in-law." The sheriff frowned, flipped through the papers. "You think he's trouble?" "I don't think," I said coldly. "I know. I just want to make sure I'm not the only one who does." Daniels leaned back, tapping the file. "He's been on our radar. Noise complaints, bar fights. Nothing major. But his name pops up. You got something solid, Tom, you bring it to me. We'll dig." I left the office lighter than I'd gone in. Not because Jason was in trouble yet, but because I'd planted the seed. Back at the cabin, Jason greeted me with a smirk. "Where have you been, old man? Thought maybe the lake swallowed you this time." "Not today," I said, my voice flat steady. Rachel glanced between us nervously. She could feel it now, the tension, the storm building under the roof of her childhood home. After dinner, Jason clapped me on the shoulder, leaning close enough that his whiskey breath burned my nose. "You don't like me much, do you, Tom?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Not one damn bit." He laughed, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. Unease. Doubt. Good. Let it grow. That night, while he slept, I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open. Page after page of notes, evidence, names, dates. Every move he made, every lie he told, every drink he downed. Jason thought he was playing me, but I wasn't playing anymore. This wasn't a game. This was the opening move in a war. And Jason didn't even know the board had been set. Jason strutted around my cabin like he'd built it with his bare hands. Every time he lifted a glass, every time he stretched out in my recliner, it felt like an insult carved into the wood and stone I'd poured my life into. He thought he owned this place already. Thought he owned Rachel. Thought he owned me. That made it easy to plan my first move. The next morning, I told Rachel I was heading into town for supplies. Jason smirked over his coffee. "Get some decent beer while you're at it." "None of that cheap stuff you drink." I didn't answer. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out. The man's arrogance was a gift. He had no idea I was documenting every slight, every drunken insult, every reckless step. In town, I stopped at Miller's Hardware. The owner, D. Miller, had been my friend for 30 years. He leaned over the counter when he saw me. "Tom, you look like a man with something on your chest." "You'd be right," I said. "You know Jason Whitmore?" Dean frowned. "The guy married to Rachel?" "He's been in here a few times. Always flashing a credit card, but half the time it gets declined. Tried to put a chainsaw on credit last week, walked out red-faced when I told him no." "Write that down for me," I said. "Date, time, everything." Dean gave me a long look, then nodded. "You're building a case." "Damn right I am." By the time I left, I had his statement in writing, signed at the bottom. Another nail for the coffin. Next, I stopped by the sheriff's office again. Dropped the hardware store note into Daniel's file. He raised an eyebrow. "You're not wasting time, Tom." "I can't afford to," I said. "He pushed me in the lake, Sheriff." Smiled while he did it. That wasn't horseplay. That was a warning. Daniels leaned back, his chair creaking. "Keep stacking the evidence. But be careful. Men like him get mean when they feel the ground shifting under them." I already knew. That was the point. That evening, Rachel cooked chicken and vegetables. Jason drank 2 whiskeys before the food hit the table. Halfway through dinner, I stood up, cleared my throat. "Rachel," I said, calm and steady, "I need to show you something." Jason froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. "What the hell are you talking about, old man?" I pulled the folder from my jacket, slid it across the table. Property records. Business dissolutions. The Tribune article with his name tied to embezzlement. The hardware store statement. Rachel blinked, confused. "What is this?" Jason laughed too loudly. "It's nothing. Old news, taken out of context. Your dad's losing it." But I watched Rachel's eyes scan the pages. The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled just slightly as she whispered, "Jason, is this true?" Jason slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "Don't you start, Rachel. This is garbage. He's trying to poison you against me." I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at him and said, "Funny how poison tastes a lot like truth." He shoved his chair back, storming out onto the deck, muttering curses. Rachel stared at the papers, biting her lip. She wanted to believe him, but doubt had sunk its teeth into her now. Good. That was strike one. Later that night, when Jason passed out drunk on the couch, I slid his phone from his pocket. He hadn't even bothered with a passcode his arrogance again. I scrolled through the messages, took photos of every debt collector's text, every overdue payment reminder. Snapped screenshots of his emails, casinos, payday loans, shady business partners. I uploaded them to the cloud. Safe. Untouchable. The next day, Jason acted like nothing had happened. But I saw the way he avoided Rachel's eyes, the way she barely touched his hand when he reached for hers. A fracture had opened between them, and I'd been the one to crack the foundation. In the afternoon, I drove into town again. This time to the local bar. I knew the owner, Mike Connor's Vietnam vet, tough as nails. I asked if Jason had been in lately. Mike snorted. Your boy's in here twice a week at least. Drinks on tabs he doesn't pay. Started a fight last month, busted a stool over another guy's back. Cops didn't press because the guy didn't want to testify, but everyone saw it. Would you be willing to put that in writing? I asked. Mike gave me a long stare, then nodded slowly. For you, Tom? Yeah, that punk's been trouble since day one. Another nail. That night, Jason cornered me in the hallway while Rachel showered. His face was red, his breath heavy with liquor. You think you're clever, old man? He hissed. Digging into my life, turning Rachel against me? I don't have to turn her against you, I said coldly. You're doing that just fine yourself. He shoved me hard against the wall. My shoulder cracked against the wood, pain shooting down my arm. But I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye and whispered, careful. You're leaving marks now. He froze. Because he knew. Evidence. Documentation. The one thing he couldn't fight with fists or fake smiles. Rachel's footsteps padded down the hall. Jason let go and stepped back, plastering on that phony grin. Everything okay out here? She asked, toweling her hair. Just fine, I said. My voice calm, steady, ice cold. She smiled faintly, but her eyes flicked between us, suspicion simmering. I watched Jason walk away, his shoulders tense, his swagger slipping just a little. Strike two. He thought he was pushing me to the edge. But the truth was, I'd already started pulling him off balance. And when he finally fell, the lake wasn't going to save him. Jason thought he still held the cards. That smug smirk, that swagger in his step like the world bent around him. But I could see it now, the cracks spreading under his feet. He was scrambling, though he'd never admit it. And I was the one loosening the floorboards. It started with Rachel. She was quieter in the mornings. She didn't lean toward him at the breakfast table anymore, didn't laugh at his empty stories. She watched him like a stranger who'd overstayed his welcome. Jason noticed. Of course he did. And every time she looked at me instead of him, his jaw tightened a little more. One evening, she asked me straight out, her voice soft but steady. Dad, is it true? The debts, the failed businesses. I didn't sugarcoat it. All of it. And worse. Her hands shook as she set down her fork. I thought he was building a future for us. He's building a hole, Rachel. And he's planning to throw both of us in before he climbs out. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't argue. Didn't defend him. That silence spoke louder than anything. Jason saw the distance growing. He didn't like it. The next night, he stumbled back from town after midnight, reeking of whiskey. He slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I was waiting in the living room, lights low. He froze when he saw me, like he hadn't expected me to still be awake. You spying on me now? He barked. Just sitting, I said calmly. House gets lonely when people don't respect it. His laugh was sharp, ugly. Respect? The stump? You should thank me for sticking around. I'm the only reason Rachel doesn't lock you away in some nursing home. I leaned forward in my chair, my voice dropping low. Careful, Jason. You're confusing me with the man you think I am. For a flicker, just a flicker, he looked unsure. Then he shook his head and staggered off to bed. But I planted something in him too. Fear. The next day, I struck harder. I drove back to town, to the sheriff's office, slid a stack of fresh evidence across Daniel's desk. Bar fights. Gambling deaths. The phone records I'd copied. Daniels whistled low. Tom, this is piling up fast. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were building a prosecution file. Just insurance, I said coldly. If Jason so much as breathes wrong, I want you ready to act. He nodded. You've got it. By the weekend, Jason's empire of lies began to wobble. One of his creditors called the cabin. Rachel answered. I watched her face pale as the man on the other end demanded payment for $12,000 in gambling losses. Jason grabbed the phone, shouting, swearing, slamming it down so hard it cracked. When he turned, Rachel was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. You told me we were fine, she whispered. We are fine, Jason snapped. Your old man's just stirring up trouble, Dash. Don't blame him for this. Her voice cut like glass. Jason froze. For the first time, Rachel's loyalty wasn't his shield. That was strike 3, though he didn't know it yet. That night, he confronted me outside by the lake. The moon spilled silver across the water, the same water he'd shoved me into days before. He got close, too close, his fists clenched. You're tearing her away from me, he hissed. No, Jason, I said evenly. You're doing that yourself. I'm just making sure she sees it. His face twisted, red with rage. For a second, I thought he might swing, but he didn't. He stormed off into the trees instead, branches snapping under his boots. I stayed by the water, calm, steady, listening to the night. He was unraveling. And unraveling men make mistakes. The next morning, I pressed harder. I called in a favor from my old bank contacts. A friend in Chicago faxed me court records Jason had filed bankruptcy 5 years ago. Concealed assets, shady transfers. No charges, but the stench was all over it. I slid the papers onto Rachel's kitchen counter while Jason was in the shower. She read every line, her face hardening with each page. When Jason came out, towel around his waist, she was waiting. Bankruptcy? Fraud? You never told me any of this. He froze, then forced a laugh. Baby, it was years ago. Doesn't mean anything now. It means everything, she snapped. He stared at her, stunned. For the first time, she wasn't bending to him. And I just sat at the table, sipping my coffee, letting the silence hammer nails into his coffin. That night, Jason didn't come home. Rachel sat by the window, watching the driveway, her hands twisting in her lap. I didn't comfort her. She needed to sit with the truth her husband was a liar, a drunk, a man crumbling under his own weight. Around 3 a.m., headlights finally cut through the trees. Jason staggered inside, shirt ripped, a bruise blooming across his jaw. He reeked of smoke and cheap perfume. Rachel turned away from him. Didn't say a word. I looked at him, calm, steady. You're running out of places to hide, Jason. His eyes burned with hate. But underneath, I saw at the first flicker of panic. The storm was here, and he had no idea just how hard it was about to hit. The first real crack came on Monday morning. Jason's BMW sat crooked in the driveway, one headlight shattered. He stumbled out of the house late, shirt wrinkled, sunglasses covering the bruise on his jaw. Rachel stood on the porch, arms crossed, not saying a word. Don't start, he muttered, climbing into the car. But the engine only coughed, sputtered, then died. He slammed the steering wheel, cursed loud enough for the crows to scatter from the trees. I sipped my coffee on the porch swing. Should have had that transmission fixed months ago, I said. He shot me a look like he wanted to kill me right there. Then he stomped back inside, barking into his phone about clients and meetings, but I'd seen the panic flash in his eyes. A man like Jason needed a working car the way a shark needed water. Without it, he couldn't run his scans, couldn't disappear into town bars, couldn't look important. Rachel followed him inside, voice low but sharp. I caught pieces. Bills, gambling, Dad showed me. Then the crash of something breaking against the counter. Jason stormed out moments later, phone still in his hand, muttering curses. I wrote it all down in my notebook. Date, time, witness, Rachel. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. That afternoon, I made another trip into town. My friend Bob at the bank pulled me into his office, shut the door. Tom, your son-in-law tried to get a loan here 2 weeks ago. Brought in paperwork claiming he owned your cabin. Deed had his name typed in. That forgery, but still fraud. Do you still have it? I asked. Bob opened a file drawer, slid the copy across the desk. Jason's signature at the bottom, sloppy but legible. I took a photo, tucked the copy into my folder. You just gave me gold, Bob, he frowned. Tom, men who forge deeds don't stop at one scam. He's desperate. Watch your back. I always do, I said, though inside I felt something colder. Not fear. Anticipation. When I got home, Jason was sitting on the couch, drinking straight from a whiskey bottle. Rachel hovered in the kitchen, her face pale. She glanced at me, then at the folder under my arm. Her lips parted like she wanted to ask, but she didn't. Not yet. Jason pointed the bottle at me. You've been poisoning her. I see it. Every word, every look. You're trying to turn her against me. I stepped closer, calm as stone. I don't have to. You're doing it yourself. His hand trembled on the bottle neck. He wanted to smash it, I could see it. But Rachel's presence stopped him. He shoved past me instead, storming out the back door. I followed. He stood at the dock, staring at the lake. The same spot he'd shoved me in. His shoulders heaved with ragged breaths. You think you're smarter than me, he said without turning. I don't think, I said. I know, he spun, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. One day you'll slip, old man. One day nobody will be here to watch. I stepped right up to him, close enough to smell the liquor on his breath. The only one slipping, Jason, is you. And when you hit bottom, I'll be there to make sure you don't climb back out. His jaw worked like he wanted to speak, but no words came. He shoved past me again, muttering. Later that night, Rachel came to my room. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the years had drained her strength. Dad, she whispered, I don't know what to do. He's not the man I thought he was. I took her hand. You don't need to do anything, Rachel. Just see him for what he is. The rest will take care of itself. Tears slid down her cheeks. She nodded. The next blow came fast. Tuesday morning, Sheriff Daniels pulled into the driveway. Jason was still asleep, sprawled on the couch. Daniels tipped his hat at me, then handed me a document. Eviction notice filed, Tom. Your property. 30 days, and if they contest, we'll take it to court. But it's ironclad. I thanked him quietly, slid the paper into my folder. Rachel watched from the porch, confusion and fear in her eyes. Jason didn't wake up until noon. When he finally read the notice, his face drained of color. He crumpled the paper, threw it across the room. This is Bull's dash. He stopped himself when Rachel flinched. He can't do this. Rachel picked up the paper silently. She read the sheriff's stamp, the official seal. Her eyes lifted to mine. For the first time, I saw belief. Not doubt. Not hesitation. Belief. Jason grabbed his keys, stormed out to the broken BMW, then realized it wouldn't start. He screamed, kicked the bumper, then stalked off down the road like a man marching to his own execution. That night, the phone rang. Rachel answered. Her face turned white as she listened. She hung up, looked at me with wide eyes. Dad, they said Jason owes $20,000. They're coming after him. Her voice shook. I only nodded. Then he'll have to face it. Rachel covered her mouth, tears spilling. Jason staggered back inside an hour later, drunk, smelling of smoke. Rachel didn't speak to him. She walked past him, up the stairs, shutting her bedroom door. He stood there, swaying, eyes wild. You're destroying me, he whispered. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Jason. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone else sees it. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He just stood there, hollow, shaking, while the walls of my cabin pressed in like a judgment he couldn't escape. And that was the moment I knew Jason wasn't just losing control. He was broken. But I wasn't done breaking him yet. The cabin had gone quiet. Too quiet. Rachel hardly spoke anymore. She moved like a shadow, slipping from room to room, keeping her distance from Jason. He noticed, of course. His temper simmered under the surface, ready to boil over at the slightest spark. One evening I found him in the kitchen, pacing like a caged animal, phone clutched in his hand. His voice was low, urgent, as he whispered into the receiver. I caught fragments. I just need more time. Don't worry, I'll have it. He's got money. I'll handle him. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he froze. Then he forced a smile, sliding the phone into his pocket. Eavesdropping, old man? Just passing through, I said. My voice flat, controlled. He smirked. You should get your hearing checked. Age does that to people, but I'd heard enough. He was plotting, and I knew exactly who the he in his call referred to. Me. That night, I set my own trap. I opened my folder on the kitchen table. Documents fanned out like a lawyer preparing for trial loan applications, bar fights, forged deed, bankruptcy papers. Then I added the photographs I'd taken of his truck receipts, the debt collector texts, the casino emails. I left the folder half open, obvious enough that even a drunk fool would notice. Then I waited. Sure enough, sometime after midnight, I heard him stumbling around. The fridge door opened, a bottle clinked, then the scrape of a chair. Silence, pages rustling. My bait had caught him. I walked in slowly, not making a sound until I was standing in the doorway. Jason's had jerked up, his face pale, the folder spread open in front of him like a crime scene. His hands trembled as he shoved the papers back inside. "You've been spying on me," he hissed. "Documenting," I corrected. "There's a difference." He stood, chest heaving. "You think you can ruin me with this? You think anyone will believe some washed-up old man over me?" I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving his. "I don't need them to believe me, Jason. I just need them to see you." For a long moment, we stared at each other, the air heavy with something darker than anger. Then Rachel's footsteps sounded on the stairs. Jason shoved the folder aside, forcing a grin. "Can't sleep," he said loudly. "Your dad and I were just talking." Rachel looked at us both, suspicion flickering in her eyes. But she said nothing. She turned and went back upstairs. Jason leaned in close, his whisper hot and venomous. "You're playing a dangerous game, Tom." I didn't flinch. "So are you. Only difference is I know the rules." The next day, I made my move. I drove to the sheriff's office with the full folder. Daniels leafed through it, his brows knitting tighter with each page. "This is damning stuff, Tom. If he steps out of line, we can nail him to the wall." "Good," I said, "because he's close." That afternoon, while Jason slept off his hangover, I slipped his phone from his jacket and forwarded his debt collector texts to my email. Then I deleted the sent log. Insurance. By the time he woke, Rachel was waiting. She'd read the documents I'd shown her the night before, the ones Jason had pretended not to see. Her face was pale but steady. "Jason," she said quietly, "how much do you owe?" His eyes darted to me, then back to her. "Nothing. He's lying to you." "Don't," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Don't lie to me again." Jason's mask slipped. His jaw clenched, his eyes burned. "You're supposed to be on my side." "I was," she said, "until I saw the truth." He roared, slammed his fist into the wall, leaving a dent in the wood paneling. Rachel flinched. I didn't move. I just watched him, calm, silent. He stormed out of the cabin, disappearing into the woods. Rachel collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "He's going to do something reckless," she whispered. I nodded. "That's the point." That evening, headlights appeared in the drive. Not Jason's wrecked BMW, a black pickup, tinted windows. 2 men inside. I watched from the porch as Jason stumbled out to meet them. His voice carried, desperate, slurred. "Just give me until Friday. I'll get it, I swear." The old man sitting on cash. "I can make him hand it over." The bigger of the 2 men grabbed him by the collar, shoved him against the truck. "You've got 48 hours, Whitmore." Not a minute more. Then they drove off, gravel spitting under their tires. Jason stood there shaking, his bravado stripped away. He didn't know I'd been watching from the shadows. Didn't know I'd recorded the whole exchange on my wife's Nikon. His debts weren't just paper now. They had faces. And those faces were dangerous. When Jason finally came back inside, his eyes were wide, his hands trembling. He looked at me like he wanted to beg, but his pride locked his jaw shut. I leaned back in my chair, calm as stone. "Trouble's knocking, Jason." "What are you going to do when I don't open the door?" He said nothing. Just stumbled upstairs to Rachel, mumbling excuses she didn't believe anymore. I sat alone in the kitchen, the Nikon on the table, the folder beside it. The evidence was growing. The trap was set. Jason thought he was circling me. But the truth was I'd already drawn the noose. The cabin didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield, quiet between shell bursts, waiting for the next explosion. Rachel moved through the rooms like a ghost, barely speaking, her eyes red from sleepless nights. Jason was unraveling. On Wednesday morning, I found him at the dock again, staring at the lake like it might give him answers. His shoulders hunched, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He lit a cigarette with trembling hands, something I'd never seen him do before. "Nice view," I said, stepping onto the boards. He turned, his grin brittle. "You like it?" "You won't for long. Once I'm done, this place is mine. Rachel will see it my way." I didn't smile. "You already tried to steal it once." "Forging deeds doesn't change ownership." His eyes narrowed, rage flashing. "You're the reason she's slipping away from me. You've been poisoning her since day one." "No," I said. "I just stopped covering for you." "That's all." He laughed then, sharp and broken. "You think you've won?" "Old man, you have no idea who you're messing with." I stepped close, lowering my voice. "I know exactly who I'm messing with. A drunk, a liar, a coward who hides behind threats. You shoved me in this lake, Jason. You wanted me gone. Instead, I'm still here. And you're the one drowning." For a second, I thought he'd swing. His fists clenched, his body tensed. But he didn't. He turned, storming back toward the cabin, muttering under his breath. The next blow came that afternoon. Sheriff Daniels pulled up the driveway, dust rising from his tires. Jason was on the porch, hungover and sullen. Daniels tipped his hat. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said. "Got some questions about recent activity in town." "Bar fights, unpaid tabs, attempted loan fraud." He turned to Jason. "Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you come by my office tomorrow morning. We need to clear some things up." Jason's face went pale. "This is harassment," he snapped. "You've been feeding him lies." He spat at me. Daniels folded his arms. "Paperwork doesn't lie. Bring yourself in tomorrow, or I'll come find you." The sheriff drove off, leaving Jason seething. Rachel stepped onto the porch, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't say a word. Her silence was worse than any accusation. That night, Jason came into my room. He didn't knock. He reeked of liquor, his eyes wild, a kitchen knife glinting in his hand. "You think you can ruin me?" His voice shook, half rage, half fear. "You think you can take everything from me and just walk away?" I didn't move, didn't blink. "Put it down, Jason. You don't have the guts." His hand trembled, the blade catching the light. For a heartbeat, the room felt frozen, the air thick with the possibility of blood. Then Rachel's voice cut through the tension like a blade of its own. "Jason." She stood in the doorway, her eyes wide, horrified. "What are you doing?" Jason froze. His grip faltered. He dropped the knife onto the floorboards with a dull clatter. "Rachel, he's twisting everything. Stop." She shouted, her voice cracking. "I've seen enough." Her words landed like a verdict. Jason staggered back, eyes darting between us. For the first time, he looked small, beaten. He stumbled out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The whole cabin shook. Rachel knelt, picked up the knife with trembling hands, and set it on my dresser. Her tears streaked silently down her cheeks. "Dad," she whispered, "I don't know how this ends." I placed a hand on her shoulder, steady. "It ends soon." The next morning, Jason didn't show up at the sheriff's office. Instead, he drove into town, desperate. By noon, I had 3 calls, one from Dean at the hardware store, one from Mike at the bar, and one from Bob at the bank. Jason had been trying everything. Loans, cash advances, even begging at the bar for someone to front him money. Nobody gave him a dime. Word was out now. By the time he came back that evening, his face was ashen, his shirt soaked in sweat. He looked at me with pure hate. "You're destroying me," he whispered. "No," I said quietly. "I'm just holding up a mirror." That night, I heard him again on the phone. His voice low, frantic. "If I can't get the money, I'll get rid of him. One way or another." He didn't know I was listening from the hallway. Didn't know I was recording every word. By the time I went to bed, the plan was sealed. The trap was ready to spring. Jason thought he was making his final move. He didn't realize I'd already planned his checkmate. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. I sat at the kitchen table with the recorder in my hand, Jason's voice playing over and over. "If I can't get the money, I'll get rid of him. One way or another." That was all I needed. Proof. Intent. Threat. the kind of words that end a man. At dawn, I called Sheriff Daniels. His voice came groggy over the line. "Daniels, it's Tom. I've got a recording you'll want to hear." By the time he pulled into the driveway, the sun was burning off the mist over the lake. Jason stumbled out of the cabin, eyes bloodshot, shirt untucked, trying to act like nothing was wrong. Daniels stepped out of his cruiser, holding a clipboard. "Morning, Mr. Whitmore. You missed your appointment yesterday." "That's a problem," Jason sneered. "I don't have to answer your questions." "Actually," Daniels said calmly, "you do. Especially when there's a credible threat on record." Jason's eyes snapped to me. I held up the recorder. "You said it yourself, Jason." One way or another, for a moment, he froze. Then he lunged, his fist cocked. Daniels moved faster. He twisted Jason's arm behind his back, slammed him against the hood of the cruiser. The sound of cuffs snapping shut echoed across the driveway. Rachel stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Jason Whitmore," Daniels said, his voice firm, "you're under arrest for making terroristic threats, attempted fraud, and pending investigation into multiple deaths and assaults." Jason twisted, shouting, spitting rage. "This isn't over, old man. You'll pay for this." I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. "No, Jason. You're the one paying." Finally, Daniels shoved him into the back seat. The doors slammed shut. The cruiser rolled down the drive, the red and blue lights fading into the trees. Silence. Real silence. For the first time in weeks, the cabin felt still again. Rachel leaned against the porch railing, shaking. "Dad, I'm sorry. For not seeing it sooner." I walked up, put my hand on her shoulder. "You see him clearly now." "That's what matters." She nodded, eyes wet, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, looking out at the lake, "he faces the consequences he's been running from his whole life." The days that followed felt lighter. Rachel moved back into her old rhythm, cooking in the mornings, humming under her breath, the weight lifting from her chest. The house no longer carried Jason's shadow. At night, I sat on the dock, the water calm beneath the moon. I thought of Martha, her voice, her warning, her quiet strength. I wished she'd lived to see this day, to see her daughter free, but I knew somewhere she had. A week later, Daniels called. Jason was facing charges stacked like bricks: fraud, threats, debts exposed to every creditor he'd lied to. His bond was denied. He wasn't going anywhere. I hung up, walked outside, and stood on the porch. The sun was setting, the sky on fire over Clearwater Lake. Rachel joined me, silent. For the first time in years, she rested her head on my shoulder, like she used to when storms frightened her as a child. We didn't need words. The silence was enough. I'd lost my wife. I'd almost lost my daughter. But I hadn't lost myself. And I sure as hell hadn't let Jason take what wasn't his. The lake shimmered in the fading light, calm and endless, carrying its secrets. I whispered to the water, to Martha, to myself, "It's finished," and it was.